A pleasant good evening, everyone. I am Carmen Cummings, a proud alumna of Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, where I'm humbled to serve as the Assistant Vice President of University Engagement and Alumni Affairs. They have been called the heart and soul of academia, birthed from the soil of rich history, woven in a tapestry of immense culture, and they are institutions of change in a journey of meaningful activism, enveloped in a legacy of greatness. They are our HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. Tonight, we are so pleased to welcome all of you to our Salute to History, African-American history, and the accomplishments on the journey as we celebrate the rise and relevance of historically Black colleges and universities. Social media and all of its platforms are off the chart these days. Memes are almost magical in gaining momentum. Most recently, our HBCU grads like Vice President Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams, Senator Raphael Warnock, Congressman Jim Clyburn, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms are among our alumni rock stars who are more elated than ever to let their HBCU pride show. And tonight, videographer Jeff Walker is going to share some sentiments from our power players through the lens of his very own. Jeff?
Okay, so here's my sorority tree.
I know, I saw that.
That's my sorority, 1908. And so we would, okay, so let me just tell you. On Friday, so you know the whole thing about Dress Down Friday?
Yeah.
No, at Howard, this is called the Yard.
Uh-huh.
And we would dress up on Fridays.
Uh-huh.
And then just promenade, everybody would promenade, hang out on the grass. All the Greek organizations would like step around their trees. It meant that you could do anything and you didn't have to be confined by anyone else's idea of what it means to be Black. You could be a fine arts student and also, you know, be class president. You could be homecoming queen and be the head of the science club. You could be a member of a sorority and be in student government and, you know, want to go to law school, and it encouraged you to be your full self.
Hello, my fellow Spelman sisters. I graduated from Spelman College in 1995, 25 years ago. But I first stepped on campus in 1991. I was 17, ready to change the world, and I knew Spelman would be a part of it. When I was 17, I set up my first voter registration table, helping sign up people to vote long before I was old enough to do so. But by December, I'd made it. When I turned 18, I registered to vote.
I went through my list of things that FAMU did to prepare me to be the 60th mayor of Atlanta. That there was nobody on this yard who thought that I couldn't do it if I so desire. That's what FAMU does for you. I got in trouble once. I was at a fundraiser and I didn't realize we were in mixed company. It was hosted by some of my classmates from FAMU. And I said, you know, the great thing about FAMU, I said, unlike some schools, you don't just come in and you're told that you are great. You work to be great.
Wow. You work to be great. Thank you, Jeff Walker. The pride just exhibited in that segment was really the impetus for this Black History Salute tonight, showcasing the rise and relevance of HBCUs. And we are so fortunate to have an esteemed panel of leaders at the helm of our HBCUs whose academic prowess will certainly generate what we do believe will be some robust dialogue this evening. So let's meet the presidents. I'll introduce each one of them, and each of them will convey remarks. She's the 10th president of the prestigious Spelman College, a leading women's college dedicated to the education and global leadership of African-American women. An art connoisseur, historian, former curator, she began her career in New York as executive director of the Studio Museum in Harlem, the country's first accredited Black fine arts museum. She also served more than 2 decades as dean of New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. Truly proud of her work as an appointee in the administration of President Barack Obama, where she served as the vice chair of the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities, a nonpartisan advisory committee to the President of the United States on Cultural Affairs. We are so pleased to welcome the Dr. Mary Schmidt Campbell, president of Spelman College, Atlanta, Georgia, founded April 1881. Welcome, President Campbell.
Thank you, Carmen. So first, let me say it is such a pleasure and a privilege to be here with my fellow HBCU presidents. In my mind, they are truly our country's heroes. So thank you for inviting me. You know, last night we celebrated some of our admitted students. And when they come to these admitted student events, I always tell them that when you're choosing a college at the age of 17 or 18 or 19, you're probably making one of the most important choices in your life, and certainly the most important choice at that age. And so I tell the women who come to these events, and I will say this year, it was a particularly big event because we had a record number of applications, 10,700 applications, from which we will put together a class of 550. And I tell these women, I said, think about where you want to come of age as a Black woman in this country. Where do you want to come into your adulthood? With what values, with what sense of history and heritage, and where do you want to go in your life? And then I give them the facts. And the facts are, if you come to any HBCU, you're coming to a place that punches well above its weight. At Spelman, we produce more Black women who complete PhDs in STEM fields than any other college in the country. If you're coming and wanting to make sure that you come to a place that completes your college degree, we have a 6-year graduation rate of 75%. That's 30 percentage points above the national average. We send almost 3/4 of our students to study abroad, so they understand themselves as citizens of the world. We expect them not only to be ambitious for themselves, but to be ambitious for each other and to take care of each other. That's what's so wonderful about being at an HBCU, that you're in a community that cares about you. And it's not only the students, it's the faculty who want you to succeed and hold the highest expectations for you. It's the staff who are there expressly for your excellence and your success. And so I always give that to our students, and I say to them, if you can come here, you should feel in your heart that you will come to a place that will make sure that we love you, we have high expectations for you, and we will do everything possible to make you succeed.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Campbell, for conveying those sentiments tonight, and we're delighted to have you with us. He is the esteemed 17th president of Howard University in Washington, having previously served as provost and chief academic officer. Most recently, the Howard University Board of Trustees selected him to serve as as the distinguished Charles R. Drew Professor of Surgery. His academic journey includes Associate Dean in the College of Medicine, Division Chief in the Department of Surgery, Director of the Cancer Center, and Deputy Provost for Health Sciences. In 2017, he was named Washingtonian of the Year. In 2015, named Male President of the Year by HBCU Digest. His medical research focuses on narrowing racial, ethnic, and gender disparities in cancer care outcomes, especially those pertaining to gastrointestinal cancers. Please welcome Wayne Frederick, MD, President of Howard University, founded March 1867.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. On March 2nd, 1867, as you pointed out, the 17th President of the United States, Andrew Johnson, signed a charter that would create Howard University. He was openly racist and was the first president, ironically, to be impeached. What he did not realize on that day, the same day that he also vetoed the first Reconstruction Acts, is that he would create the university that would send the first Black woman to the White House as Vice President of the United States in the form of Kamala Harris. So here at Howard, we like to say that he's not only turning over in his grave, but he's probably trying to dig it a little deeper today. Because when you look at the essence of why this university was created, to educate freed slaves moving from the South, to promote Black excellence, to form solutions for the problems that engender our entire community, he probably created the ultimate solution in Kamala Harris. And Howard University embodies its motto in truth and service in what we do within the entire HBCU community. And I think that that's extremely important. So I certainly want to thank President Robinson for this opportunity. We send more African Americans to medical school. We've graduated more African American physicians than any other institution in this country. But quite a significant number of them went to undergrad at our fellow HBCUs. And so we see ourselves as part of a community of scholars, part of a community of those who are coming to us to change the world. At Howard, we talk to students about their mission, not their major, because we ultimately want students to come here and find the truth. And we tell them that that truth only comes alive when you go outside and you provide service in the name of others. So we don't just have people come here to get degrees, but they come here to get an education. And that education lives its full life when they go out and serve others. So I am happy to be here with you and among my esteemed colleagues. And certainly, I hope that most of our discussion would be about the significance of our HBCUs, because discussing their relevance is what happened on March 1st, 1867. And they became significant as of March 2nd, 1867.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so very much for sharing with us and for being with us tonight, President Frederick. In my own life, I would say this just in, and we do have a special treat from the Honorable Congressman Jim Clyburn, proud alum of the South Carolina State University.
I am where I am today in large measure because of that campus of South Carolina State University and the student body with whom I interacted over those years that I spent as a student in that institution.
Wow, thank you so much, Jeff, for delivering that, and it was right on time, spot on. His proven experiences in leading Fortune 5 to 500 companies has prepared him to provide the leadership necessary to move South Carolina State University to the next level. He served as vice president of a $1 billion division of AT&T, which he credited with converting from a money-losing section into the most profitable division in AT&T's computer business. His career path includes General Electric, Gillette, and Exxon International. He's been applauded for his skills as a team motivator and consensus builder. A native of Quincy, Florida, just west, about 20 minutes west of Tallahassee. He often refers to his parents as, quote, the smartest people he knows. As he says, they instilled in him the value of a good education, hard work, and discipline. Please join me in welcoming President James E. Clark, the 12th leader at the helm of South Carolina State University, founded March 1896. President Clark, welcome.
Thank you ever so much, Carmen. And I also want to say thank you for the invite to Dr. Robertson. We're from we share hometowns in the Panhandle. I am most honored to be here with such esteemed leaders as that are on this panel here. And I come from a small country town, and where the Black experience in segregated schools was something very, very special in a certain way, because there were individuals that knew your parents, they knew your sister, your brother, they taught your sister or brother, and they cared about you. And if you got out of line, they cared about you enough to get the message home without a telephone before you got home. And they cared enough about you to instill in you that education was critical, and that they would do whatever they had to do in order to help move you forward. And that is what HBCUs are all about, that caring environment, that caring nature, people that understand and that provide an environment, like in our case, in some cases, it's access and affordability that, but for the existence of it, many of our youth will not have access. As a land grant institution, South Carolina State is one, as a matter of fact, like FAMU, that really has a research and extension initiative that reaches out into our communities and works to really do things for the community, for our people. Now, we do that, although we don't have agriculture in our name, we do that just like so many other institutions, our 1890 institutions. But as we do that, we can't lose sight of the fact that we're an institution that provides students who might be from a town of 500 to be able to do cancer research, or to be able to become a nuclear engineer, or, as many of you know, become a leader in our military, because we produce leaders of all sorts, and we're probably the most known for producing the most flag officers or generals of any institution other than West Point. We're the type of institution that provides an opportunity for students from areas, they may be rural or they may be urban, to become teachers, the next generations of teachers and educators that we so dearly need and so desperately need. And so while it sometimes is really exciting to be maybe in the STEM field or in the business area, and I happen to have gone to those, we do not lose sight of the fact that but for the educators of the world, the future educators of the world, that none of us would be here. And we produce a lion's share of that as an institution. And so HBCUs is getting a lot of limelight now. SC State, along with all the rest. But we're not doing anything different today than we were doing last week, last month, last year, 10 years ago, in some cases 100 years ago. It's just that now people are starting to recognize and see it, something that we've known all along. And so no matter what our size, you can be a small little operation in a small town in the middle of South Carolina, or you can be in the metropolis of DC, or you could be a large institution in the capital, Tallahassee, or you could be a premier institution right there in Atlanta. Doesn't matter. We're all about the same thing of providing an environment that transforms the lives of the individuals, the families, and the communities that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Clark, for being with us. And I will have to convey my regards to your family and friends in Quincy, Florida. We're again delighted to have you with us. He is the 12th president of Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University and a distinguished professor and researcher in the School of the Environment at FAMU, previously serving and answering the call on several occasions as interim president, the director of FAMU's Environmental Sciences Institute, provost and vice president for academic affairs and vice president for research. He is actively engaged in research with students and faculty as the director and principal investigator for the Center for Coastal and Marine Ecosystems. His recent honors include an appointment to serve on the National STEM Education Advisory Panel, Congressional Task Force to encourage U.S. scientific and technological innovations in education. A nuclear chemist, he also served as senior scientific advisor at the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Cooperative State Research, Education, and Extension Service. He proudly accepted the Senate-confirmed position as Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Conservation and Management at NOAA, participating on the front lines addressing the BP oil spill crisis. Please welcome Dr. Larry Robinson, President of Florida A&M University, founded October 3rd, 1887. President Robinson.
Well, thank you, Ms. Cummings. Let me tell you that I'm almost speechless just to be in the presence of these three great leaders, recognizing the work that they do on a day-to-day basis in support of students and all the other things that we do in an academic setting, and realizing the impact that these institutions have had on the lives of students in the communities around the world. Really is really somewhat overwhelming when you think about it. And so I just want to thank all three of you personally for accepting the invitation to join us tonight. And as I said, in our pre-meeting discussion, I will try to limit my discussion because I want to hear from you guys as much as I can. I have to say a few things about FAMU, however, before yielding to you. And I guess what I would like to convey is that, we all, have a basket full of accolades, and they are all significant. But I think what we are most proud of are those things that relate to the success of our students, in the classroom and beyond. Whether we're talking about the highest ranked public institution or the highest ranked private institution in the nation, those things are only meaningful in the sense that we know what those underlying metrics are that allows us to share those distinctions. And that's what we really focus on. I don't think any of us, I certainly don't wake up in the morning figuring out how do I move my rankings up, but I wake up thinking about how do I do more to support the students at Florida A&M University, and I know you all do the same. But of all of the rankings that we have, this year and over time, I guess the most significant one to me that really tells, our true value is the U.S. News and World Report's social mobility ranking. FAMU is ranked 20th in the country with regards to social mobility, was an indicator of, where students come in terms of their socioeconomic status and how quickly we get them out into the world and ultimately into gainful employment, but also meaningful roles in their community. We often say it's not just enough to come here and leave as a good scientist or educator, or musician, or writer. We want our students to go back into the communities and be the Keisha Lance Bottoms of the future. That's what we really need. And we owe that to all of those people who came to this institution starting October the 3rd, 1887. And then that's one thing that I say to all students and their parents when they come. Now our numbers are trending similar to what you just heard regarding Spelman. We will break our admissions application numbers, but we are already on a pace to do it again. And this is the second time in just 3 years. So this year is going to outdo the best year that most say that we've ever had. And the importance of that to me is that it allows us to reach into a population that still needs and can benefit from what we offer here. So I say to parents, that when you look at all of the data and think about all of the successful outcomes for African Americans, keeping in mind our doors are open to anyone who endeavors to cross the threshold onto these hallowed grounds. But when you look at the data with regards to where African Americans come from, who want to do anything and most of everything in every discipline, and you don't give a serious look at sending your loved one to one of these wonderful historically Black colleges and universities, then you're really doing those young people a disservice. Furthermore, we like for everybody to understand that, you know, it's not just that we tell the students that you don't have to prove to us that you have the innate ability to be successful in anything that they choose to do. You know, we tell them that they will get there as long as they're willing to work as hard as we are willing to work on their behalf. But beyond that, we also know that the world needs them. And we have to make sure that they get out into the world and start making the change that we saw in the last few months. But as you just heard from President Clark, this didn't start in 2020. It started from the day that these universities were conceived, and we're here to make sure that that continues well into the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Robinson, for your leadership and for your willingness to host this kind of conversation about the relevancy and rise of HBCUs. Our HBCUs have been applauded for laying a strong foundation for academic strides and success. Our graduates have experienced, many of them, meteoric rise and landing in spaces of prominence today that many years ago, many of them just dreamed about. HBCUs are part of the stellar reality that has helped put our institutions in the spotlight. And so many of us can truly bask in the glow of pride and optimism for what awaits our students today who are a part of the HBCU family and what they can look forward to on the horizon. To that end, President Campbell, I can only imagine your thoughts as you watched your very own Stacey Abrams making mega moves in the state of Georgia, and the impact her work and the other volunteers who collaborated with her, and the end game, the results in the state of Georgia. Just tell us how you felt.
Well, let me start with a story. You know that Stacey Abrams ran for governor, and she came this close to winning. And our students on Spelman's campus worked very, very hard in her campaign. And I remember the night that the night of the election, we were all sitting in our student government center, and students started coming back with these horror stories of what was happening out in the polls. Machines were breaking down, people were being turned away, the polls were closing while people were still in line, awful things. So we knew then, that was our first sign that it was not going to go well. Spelman invited Stacey Abrams to come and speak because we wanted to give her an award and embrace her, you know, in the wake of her defeat. And I'll never forget, she stood in front of our Spelman students and she said, "I didn't win the election, but I won. And the victory I won is that I understand now how the process works. I understand now how I have to organize. I understand now what has to be done." And for the next 2 years, she never stopped working in Georgia, registering voters, understanding where the voter suppression pain points were, making sure there were poll workers on that day. She changed history. And she will say and she says in her documentary, she will say that her ability to be bold and her ability to go out there and feel that, you know, even if she fails, she could just get up and keep going, came from her, of course, her family and her faith, but also her education at Spelman College. And so I always use Stacey Abrams as an example for my students, because I think her actions are a very powerful lesson.
Yes, indeed, President Campbell. President Frederick, as you can see, I am proudly adorning my pearls tonight. And I don't want to show you how limber I can be, but I can assure you that I have my chucks as well. Can you just take us back, if you would, to campus that day? Was there an explosion of joy swirling about the campus as you and the Howard Bisons witnessed the oath of office for your diehard alumna, Kamala Harris, as Vice President of the United States of America?
Well, certainly that day, January 20th, was a one of joy. For me personally, it's difficult to talk about publicly because Vice President Kamala Harris actually invited me to the inauguration, and I sat amongst her family and friends. And I have to tell you, it was as intimate an affair as I probably have attended. It was emotional. It was tear-jerking in every way, shape, and form. But it was also very fulfilling, because to know someone that well, who, just as I am an alum of this university, but also to know someone that long before this had a commitment to this institution. She served on the search committee that identified me as elected me as the president. She created a congressional fellowship for Howard students to participate in congressional offices, expanded it to HBCUs on both sides of the aisle. To know her grace, to know her charisma, her intellect. I know we talk a lot about her ethnicity and her gender, but the reality is that the thing that she has I would say in an abundance above the 48 white men who served before her, is that intellect and experience and charisma. And I think that we'll get a chance to see it. So this campus was certainly filled with pride. We rang the founder's bell 49 times in honor of the first female vice president. And my intent was to be here to listen to it, but I was actually sitting at the foot of watching her actually take the oath. And it's something that I will always take with me for the rest of my life, that to witness that in particular was a culmination of so many that have gone before her and so many that will come after her. And she always has spoken about that it is a culmination of a journey for some, but certainly the beginning of a journey for so many others.
And now she's a part of the pages of history on a different level at Howard University. Thank you so much, President Frederick. Now, we talked about Chucks and Pearls, how they're a mega hit now on social media, but President Robinson, many people may not be aware of the fact that there is an interesting HBCU connection that truly is close to home at Florida A&M University, if you would elaborate, sir.
First of all, I remember when it came to my knowledge that one of our own was going to be then candidate Harris's political director, right? Vince Evans, right? I texted, President Frederick and said, there's no way she could lose with a rattler on her side, right? So I just want that to go on the historical record as well. But furthermore, it's really ironic that she donned those Converse All-Stars because, one of our graduates, Scott Uzel, is the CEO, right? The president of Converse All-Stars. Isn't it really wonderful when you start putting all of these magical connections together? And so I was just as proud as Howard. I was claiming her too, right?
Yes, we all were.
I bet the world supply of pink and green, was diminished for a while. They had to build it back up, but it just made us also proud, but not just us. I wrote recently that it has inspired, young women of color, all around the world, African-American, Asian, Hispanic, and so forth, seeing this phenomenal occurrence in this nation. Marred a little bit, you know, in terms of what happened, you know, at the insurgency, but to me, you know, this is still one of the biggest events that I think this community has been able to celebrate in recent years. So I'm just as proud as President Frederick is, and I believe everybody else on this call. But it's the network, and I tell students this all the time, in this, you know, in the space that we're in, you know, we compete on a lot of levels, but we're together on so many more. And, you know, people hear about the competition in football and our bands and don't realize that intellectually, in terms of what we're trying to do socially and economically on the behalf of our communities, we are all on the same page there, right? And that's why I respect these leaders so much, having been able to witness that firsthand.
Yes, indeed. And we've got to contact Scott, because I also need some orange and green chucks, I think, to go with my pink and green ones. Thank you, Mr. President. President Clark, I recall the night that I sat up watching MSNBC and saw Congressman Clyburn reflecting on the truly mind-blowing sequence of events in election 2020. Then to notice that South Carolina State baseball cap, it was so impressive. And then we also saw it again on the steps of the historic Capitol at inauguration. What were your thoughts when you saw that South Carolina State pride beaming through?
Well, actually, I have to go back and share a bit more that leads up to it, so you have the full effect. Because of the timing of everything in the political arena, and because of none other than James E. Clyburn, many political candidate aspiring to be president made his or her way to the campus of SC State. And so, I mean, whether it was, you know, Biden or Gabbard or Buttigieg or Sestak or Steyer, you know, all of them, O'Rourke and Warren and Harris and Booker and others, it was a special event. I remember we had a kind of a town hall session with now our wonderful vice president. But sometime before, I had made a rash statement that the power couple or candidate to win would be Biden-Harris. And everyone thought I was kind of crazy at the time. And so I was kind of hanging out there, especially because things were looking pretty shaky on the Biden side for a while. And but a particular moment I will remember, and I knew that had clinched it. And it was less than 30 seconds. It might have been 15 seconds. And it was, I know Joe. We know Joe. But most importantly, Joe knows us. That sealed the deal. Majority Whip, James E. Clyburn, when he said that, all bets were off, game over, that's it, everybody go home. So at that moment, I knew it was over. And I knew, because I've always known about that loyal son and the impact that he has. I mean, he's most loyal son, a bulldog here. The impact that he would have was just going to be so powerful and long lasting. And I think he was hesitating earlier and was probably going to wait a while. But when he came out early and did that, I knew that was going to be strong. So that kind of passion and loyalty that we always talk about, we all knew was there all along. But the night before, when he was on, and he had his fraternity cap on, and he did not have any pins on or anything that said SC State. I was down in the dumps because that was just so unbecoming. I said, oh man, I mean, what happened? Did I do something wrong? What is it, you know? And so imagine being so down in the dumps. And I look up and he starts walking down with this cap on. Now, let me get another detour. A friend of mine out in the state of Arizona, Washington, who happened to be white, he sent me a note that he and his wife were freaked out. Said, "Who can that be walking down with a MAGA hat on at the inauguration?" And then when they saw the SC State, they jumped up and cheered and immediately, you know, sent accolades and so forth to him. But it was a bold stroke, but it was a statement not just for SC State. And knowing James E. Clyburn, it was not just a statement for SC State, the alma mater he's so loyal to. He was making a statement to everyone about HBCUs. He was making a Kamala Harris statement at Howard University right then on the spot. He was making a statement about Spelman, about FAMU and all the HBCUs. Finally, there's a moment, even if it's only for a few seconds, that look, HBCUs are standing tall and standing proud. And of course, we were all so proud. We were also elated. Just a red baseball cap. Well, actually, it's not red, but it's a official.
Like a maroon.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, whatever it was, it had SC State on it.
It had
and
SC
you are
State.
right. It was a credit to the magnitude of HBCUs.
It's technically Garnet. Garnet is the technical.
Okay, we'll call it Garnet then. Thank you so very much, President Clark. You're tuning in to our Salute to Black History, the rise and relevance of HBCUs, featuring esteemed presidents of Spelman College, Howard University, South Carolina State, and hosted by our very own Florida A&M University President, Dr. Larry Robinson.
Ms. Cummins, may I just add one other very important point here? Some of you may realize that at some point in time along the way, it was running very close for South Carolina to be the only state to have 2 Black senators. Jamie Harris was running, he was running a very strong race. And when the nominations were happening, Congressman Clyburn gave up a slot such that Jamie Harris from our campus here put into count the South Carolina delegation's votes. And so I want to say that Congressman Clyburn is also reaching out to others and trying to uplift others and make a difference in many, many other ways as well.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much again, President Clark. The role and relevance of HBCUs in national politics. Considering the last election and the significant work by mega change agents like the Honorable Congressman Clyburn and Stacey Abrams and others involved in the Black Voters Matter initiative, how impactful would you say the last election cycle was to the so-called newfound relevance of HBCUs? President Campbell, I'll ask you to lead, followed by President Clark.
Well, I think that it seemed to burst almost out of nowhere, right? But of course it didn't. The work on college campuses started way back at the dawn of the civil rights movement, because our students on our campuses were among the first to put their lives on the line, right? Sitting at lunch counters, registering people to vote, being out there walking, shoulder to shoulder across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The students from HBCUs have a long history of being deeply involved in the kind of activism that you saw at the election. It takes a different shape in different eras. So in this era, it really was about organizing our communities in a way that they could come out and register, they could come out and vote, they could understand how to avoid the hassle of getting trapped into the traps of voter suppression. So it's, as I said, it's not that we did something different, we just found a way of doing it that met the needs of today.
Thank you. President Clark.
If we speak of the political arena and activism and involvement, we, especially when it comes to the Black community, you cannot have that discussion without thinking of HBCUs. The awareness, the additional awareness, the outreach, and so forth is critical. As was mentioned, the lunch counter sit-ins and so forth, it happened oftentimes. The initiative, the impetus for it happened at HBCUs. Here recently, there's been a movement that captured under the phrase of Black Lives Matter, a sensitivity to young African Americans being shot and so forth. But 53 years ago on this campus, literally feet away from where I am sitting right now, 3 young Black men were shot in the back in the Orangeburg massacre. Now it got tamped down. I think it was right about the time Kent State happened, and there's a big photo a lot of people remember about Kent State, but it got suppressed. But it was all in part of our students trying to desegregate a bowling alley, just wanting to be able to go to a place where the students or members of a community could go to a bowling alley. They put their lives on the line 53 years ago. So at our core as an HBCU, social injustice, racial injustice, the rights of the individual, is something that we cherish, that we know, that we live, that our students live, are fully engaged in, and they're out there politically engaged each and every day because they never, ever forget.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, President Clark, President Campbell. To you, President Robinson and President Frederick, many of you as leaders of HBCUs have seen your respective schools and your profiles elevated as you have appeared on national television and online shows. In this moment, how important have those opportunities been to the relevancy of HBCUs in your respective institutions?
Well, thank you, Ms. Cummings. It gives us an opportunity to share the story, and I've done so many of those recently. It's hard to keep track, but I value each and every one of them, and I try to carry with those a special message. And sometimes it's the same message, right, about the great things that happen at Fort M University every day, but within the community as well. And I try to make sure that in all of those conversations, I include comments that get people to think larger, about the big picture. Because if you look at the collective impacts that we have on this nation and the world, it's undeniable, right? And I often say in those conversations, can you imagine what life, for persons of color would be like in this country, African Americans in particular, without historically Black colleges and universities, right? We gave rise to the African American middle class in this country, right? And we're still doing more to support the economic, growth of our communities than anyone else. And so I value each and every one of those as an opportunity to share the story. And whether they want to hear it or not, they're going to get the story, right? And I just would recommend to everybody out there who really care about these institutions, and I know you do, is to find your own story to tell, about your own personal experiences. And remember, that it's what happened in the end that really matters. You may have had a few stumbles along the way. You know, we joke all of the time about the person who complains about, you know, their financial aid being late when there was a freshman, and now they are the vice president of a company, but they're still holding on to that. Let that go, right? Really think about the impact that these institutions have had on your lives. That's the story I want to tell. And I want to make sure that people understand too, it's not about me, it's about all of us, right? I just happen to be at the helm of an institution as a collection of great individuals who are committed to the same mission that I have and share a common vision from our board of trustees, you know, to every administrator and faculty on this campus.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Frederick, have these opportunities meant everything to your institution as well? I'm sure they have.
You know, the opportunities have been certainly useful to tell our story. I think what's important is that we have to recognize, as you've heard from the prior presidents, that this is a long history. And while there is a coming of age and reckoning in terms of other people's awareness, the reality is the work has been done. The first popularly elected senator after Reconstruction was African-American was Senator Edward Brooke from Massachusetts, Howard alum. You know, and so the path that has been paved has been a long, winding path that has been filled with the footsteps of HBCU alum all along the way. And we have an opportunity to tell that, but we also have a responsibility to contemporize that experience, to talk about a social innovation hub on a campus like this, where we're trying to bring social sciences and humanities back to the forefront of where they should be, to talk about a vaccination center that we have stood up in our medical school to vaccinate the African-American population here in DC, and to ensure that in spite of the disinformation and misinformation and distrust of the medical community, that we can be a trusted messenger. And so it has given us that opportunity to talk about the contemporary experience of why our historically Black colleges and universities, and Howard as well, are extremely important in terms of finding solutions for the current day problems that the nation faces. And I think that every opportunity we get to do that, and every opportunity we seize to do that, we actually bring our nation much further along.
Exactly. Thank you so much, President Frederick. Our HBCUs have certainly pinned their place in the chronicles of social activism. As far back as the 1930s, I believe, Howard students engaged in protests against segregation and job discrimination by stores in downtown Washington, D.C. When Spelman issued the call for an appeal for human rights, the women of Spelman spelled out the directive and carved out their place in history as agents of change, protesting in Atlanta, pushing for desegregation of public schools, fighting against segregation in public buildings, transportation, theaters, hospitals, hotels. Florida A&M University, the only state-supported public land-grant institution in the state of Florida, was in the middle of it all in the 1950s, where 2 female students from FAMU were arrested for sitting next to a white woman on a city bus. In the 1960s saw a year-long campaign of sit-ins protesting segregation in department stores and lunch counters. Hundreds of students were arrested. Many were fired with tear gas. White mobs threatened them with guns and other weapons. President Clark made reference to the tragedy involving students there in the state of South Carolina and the chilling confrontation between protesters and law enforcement, resulting in the killing of 3 students. Students were standing tall because they wanted to end segregation in a bowling alley in their community. So peaceful protests among our students at HBCUs have been an integral part of the legacy of activism. And while the dates on the books have changed, the reality in some of these issues regarding social injustice and racial inequality remain. Recent events around the country remind us that we still have a long way to go and have really become more heightened in this political climate. Many of our HBCU students are joining community activists and pounding the pavement in support of missions like Black Lives Matter. And we've witnessed in some cities where the National Guard and police were already in place before activists arrived at the designated venue. Some of those movements have been targeted and referred to in some spaces as terrorist missions. Yet many of us have spirits that are still troubled, emotions reeling from scenes of a recent violent siege reportedly by extremist groups of our nation's capital. It took hours for National Guard troops to receive authorization to engage and assist in protecting members of Congress who were sheltering in conference rooms. How do you feel as leaders of your respective institutions about the safety of our students who are so eager to be agents of change and be a part of relevant social activism in today's climate, where it's been said that these extremist groups, despite the historic regime of 46 that is in the White House, many of these extremist groups may not be disappearing anytime soon? Mr. President of Florida A&M University, I'll begin with you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Cummings. Well, I'm very concerned, right? As you know, our students historically have participated peacefully in actions of social justice in this city and around the state. And this year, though, it has been particularly concerning because of those other forces that have stepped back to the forefront, willing to endanger the lives of others, to snuff out the attention to the horrible issues that brought on these marches and protests in the first place. However, I was very, very pleased by our student leadership and in helping to set a tone for the continuation of peaceful engagement. I was very, very impressed that our own football team, led by the students themselves, had a peaceful march here in Tallahassee in protest of the social injustice that was happening around the nation. And as an African-American, after seeing what we saw last month at the nation's capital, it's kind of foolish to think that, you know, everything is all right, right? It wasn't all right before then, and it's not all right now. But it's been the case all along, right? I mean, can you imagine? I tell people to try to think about what the world was like for this institution and these others on this call tonight when we were founded. You know, think about what it was like trying to educate African Americans in 1887, you know, in the 1920s, and through those years that you just mentioned. So this type of violence isn't new to us, but at the same time, it's important that we don't allow it to get us off track in terms of the way that we have responded over time. It's a dangerous world out there, and the standards for how people respond to protests and marches is clearly different. The disparity is just as clear as it is when it comes to you know, medical and health disparities, right? And so we have to realize that it would be foolish for us not to do so. So we have to advise our young men and women about the potential dangers, right? And put arms around them, not to suggest that they don't get engaged, because you're not going to stop them anyway, but help them understand the rich traditions that we have at these institutions, you know, of protesting and expressing ourselves in ways that doesn't put others' lives in jeopardy.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Frederick, you're just a few blocks from our nation's capital. And even though we have truly enjoyed and are still on a high of the events on Inauguration Day, we can't forget about what happened just a week before. what was the mood on the campus when, after you're basking in the joy of the election of Vice President Harris, and then to see what happened just miles away from your campus? What were your feelings? What were your concerns with the turmoil that was taking place, and how your students were going to be impacted by the scenes of the siege that day?
You know, it was eerily calm, and I think it was eerily calm because ultimately our democracy is messy, but it works. It's not as clean and as smooth as we would like it, to be quite honest, but the reality is that it works. We had a president who took the country in a certain direction, and with all of the messiness of the democracy, it resulted in sending a Black woman, an alumna of HBCU, to the White House. And sometimes that's what our democracy does. It swings back and forth. But I think the other thing that is important about the mood was what one of my mentors used to say all the time. FAMU grad, it was Florida A&M College at the time, President Robinson, Dr. LaSalle LaFall, from your hometown, President Clark, in Quincy, Florida, which he used to describe as one traffic light in that town. But that gentleman, Dr. LaFall, always used to talk about the fact that hope is the anticipation of tomorrow. He spoke about it in the context of providing that to cancer patients that he would operate on. That ultimately what we are there to do is to provide hope. And I see that in the context of our country and our young people. What we do at our HBCUs ultimately is to make sure that that hope is springing eternal through them, through their transformation. And that's why as we continue to see the resistance to change, we must make sure that they are focused and stay on that path to continue to change. And we have to continue to let them know it's not going to be easy. It's not a straight road. It's not without challenges. And that they must obsess about the journey itself, because no destination will completely fulfill them, but they must carry hope with them. And I think ultimately that's what we saw between January 6th and January 20th. We saw what hope does in this country to propel it. And hopefully the young people that saw that will remain committed to their activism and their advocacy.
Thank you so very much.
Ms. Cummings, if I could just briefly add, because I was a teenager in Memphis, Tennessee, during the time, or at the time that Dr. King was assassinated. I lived through, the marches and the strikes and so forth. And I remember I was scarred by his assassination. It was something that stayed with me. Somehow I felt as a teenager I could have done something to prevent it from happening. It took me a while to really understand that this country, the founding principles of this country was going to be able to withstand even that type of violence and wickedness, and it has, right? And so as you know, I wrote a statement saying that I am still, I still believe in the vision, of this being the greatest democracy in the world. I still believe that, and I want our students to understand that. And as long as we do and we fight for that in the ways that are appropriate, then we will continue to wind up in a place, in spite of these big swings, that moves the vision, moves us closer to that vision. Clearly we're not there yet, but we can't lose hope, and we can't let people make us lose hope. But by doing things that incite other parts, of our reality, and get us to respond in ways that are not beneficial to anyone.
And Carmen, if I can add.
I was just about to come to you, President Campbell.
Thank you.
Please.
Protests and pounding the pavement are one form of activism. But there are many forms of activism, and I just want to give you two examples, because I think our students on our HBCU campuses have really been incredibly imaginative and versatile in understanding the different ways they can make change. So we invited Brian Stevenson to our campus to speak. Our students had read his book, Just Mercy, and he gave a presentation. We had lunch with the students I have a reading circle. We had lunch with the students in our reading circle. And one of my students was so moved by what he said about being proximate to a problem that as a sophomore, she organized a reading group for the Wentworth Women's Prison. That's 3 miles north of Atlanta. And she would go there every 2 or 3 weeks with a group of students. And now they have an extremely effective group, sending them books, when they get out, staying in contact with them and connecting with a program to reduce recidivism. And this kind of inspiration comes from who we bring on our campus and how we inspire our students. I'll give you a second example. I had dinner one night for the principals of the schools that surround our neighborhood. There are about 6 of them. And they go from elementary, middle school up to high school. And I said to the principals, I said, how can Spelman be helpful to you? And I thought they'd tell me, teach us science or teach us, math or whatever. Every single one of those teachers said to us, teach our students how to read. I was blown away. But what our students did is we got our education department to provide literacy training for about 100 students. And over 2 or 3 years, they went out into those schools. And in those 3 years, they improved reading scores, in some schools by as much as 20%. That's activism. That's agency. That's saying, what can I do to change this? And I think HBCUs are brilliant at giving our students the opportunity and the tools and the confidence and the boldness to do exactly that kind of activism.
Change agents. Thank you so very much, President Campbell. And President Clark, would you like to weigh in before we move to our next subject?
Yes, and I think it was maybe Dr. Robinson had mentioned that it's always been there. And I think it's important for us to realize multiple aspects of that. And then I also want to talk about mechanisms for change. As I had mentioned earlier, we mentioned the small town where I grew up, a lot of segregation and so forth, and a lot of tough things. But to think that what I experienced there just went away, after a few years, or was only located in the Deep South, would be a foolish thought. So one of the things that was very educational for me is that the biggest, as the expression goes, cussing out that I got, in other words, happened up in Boston, up in South Boston, because busing was just starting there in the 70s. And so these types of feelings have always been beneath the surface, and in some cases, very, very deep. And just like HBCUs didn't just happen overnight and are now in the limelight, some of these thoughts and feelings have been there for a long, long times, and their light is just being shone on them, or they're being elevated now. So we must keep that in mind. And with that in mind, one of the things that we've started is that we're launching is a center focusing on social injustices and racial injustices. And we call it E-Race, for eradicating racism and then constructing equity. And the activism part there is one of figuring out ways to communicate with people who have disparate views, to try to get at the root cause of some of the racism and how people think about each other, and dive deep into educate and to understand, because that is part of the activism as well. Working with each other to understand what's at the root cause to try to affect change at that level. And so that's one of the things that as a small institution, also here, a rural institution in the South, is yet another form of activism that we think that we'll be able to put forth as an institution. And I suspect all of my comrades here are doing similar things. So it is important for us to understand that there are a lot of touch points for us. And as institutions, we reach out to all of those touch points in many different ways.
HBCUs with meaningful purpose as agents of change. Thank you so much, President Clark. We're so fortunate to have this esteemed panel of university presidents with us tonight. After the conversation, we will avail an opportunity to have members of the FAMU communications team go through and filter questions that you may have. So we'll do that a little bit later in our programming. Many of us have read about the plagues and pandemics. Some were biblical accounts, some more than 100 years ago in this country, but never did many of us think that we would be living and navigating in a pandemic, but we are. And our HBCUs are not only navigating these unprecedented times, but are being recognized for strides and incredible success on the front lines as we wade through the era of COVID-19. President Schmidt Campbell, we'll start with you. How are your collaborations with your neighbors producing meaningful results? Because I just have a feeling that you are collabing with others on this mission to battle coronavirus.
So we're very fortunate to be part of a consortium. And the consortium includes, in addition to Spelman College, Morehouse College, Clark Atlanta University, and Morehouse School of Medicine. And when it became first apparent that we had to evacuate our campuses and move out and to move into this sort of sheltering in place mode and this new COVID-19 mode, we very quickly got together as a consortium and really under the leadership of Dr. Valerie Montgomery Rice, began to plan for medical protocols, for testing protocols, for decisions about remote learning versus in-person learning as a group, and understanding what thresholds of infection rates, hospitalizations, death rates would cause us to have only remote learning, what would enable us to bring back some small portion of our students. And we really had to come out of our individual identities as colleges and understand that if we would have to function as a community if we were going to get through this successfully. But the other thing is to understand what was our responsibility as a consortium in Southwest Atlanta to the rest of our community. And so to that end, we began when vaccines became available, Spelman College offered its parking lot so that Morehouse School of Medicine could administer twice the number of vaccinations because they were then able to use our site along with their site. Understanding how Morehouse School of Medicine's new medical center could be employed as a community vaccination site. Understanding having I won't call her a COVID czar, but a COVID director who was available to all 4 campuses, who could answer questions for us. If we had issues of how to promote or message to our students, could oversee our material. So it really has been, the silver lining in this has been all 4 of our colleges are working much more closely, much more cooperatively, and much closer in our relationship to our local community.
Thank you, President Campbell. President Robinson, FAMU's COVID-19 testing operation just received awards for your success in raising awareness and safeguarding our students, faculty, administration. Dr. Robinson, as a leader driven by the science, are you amazed that this operation, which was first met with some concern and scrutiny in the beginning, has risen to successfully testing thousands of people now?
Well, to get the number right, we're approaching 250,000 tests being administered at the site, right? Well, actually, those are individuals. But you're absolutely right. We've had this community-based testing site since April the 25th of last year. And since then, in fact, the original idea was that it would be here a couple of weeks and it would provide 2,500 tests, right? But the real motivation for me to insist that we had it here was that we wanted to make sure that it was accessible to persons of color and low economic means here on the south side of Tallahassee, where a large population of African Americans reside. And furthermore, we wanted to be, and in fact, it was the first that didn't require a physician's referral or appointment and all of those kinds of things. And people could drive up, get tested, park on our football stadium parking lot, and get their test. In those days, a few days later, we've morphed into a new mode of operation, ironically, where we're doing about as many tests per day as was envisioned for that whole time frame. Between 2,000 and 3,000 tests a day are conducted at this site. I've been tested about 5 times already since we came back in early January, and each of those times my results have been provided in around 30 minutes or less. Just an amazing transformation in that aspect of the testing site. But I'm gonna tell you, people from all places, all shapes and sizes, all races, come to the site. But it is accessible to folks here on the south side. But then that's only part of it. It took a collaboration to do that. Collaboration with the Florida Department of Health, Division of Emergency Management, Bond Community Health Clinic, an African American clinic here on the south side, and so many others, as you know, who have provided funding to support all of the volunteers, our faculty, staff, and in some cases students who have worked the site along with the National Guard and so many more. And so the awards that were provided last week, really honored some of those champions, like Ms. Tanya Tatum and Dr. Cynthia Harris, the Director of our Institute of Public Health. And I'm gonna tell you that it is helpful in terms of getting the site onto our campus in the first place, that the Deputy Secretary of Health for the state of Florida is an alumnus of the FAMU Institute of Public Health, right? And has it ingrained in her to want to do good on the behalf of the community and the institution that helped make her. Just today, moving on to what's next, is that we just declared in a conversation we had with the Department of Health, Florida Department of Health and Division of Emergency Management as a community-based vaccination site here on our campus that will probably open within the next week or so. And of course, we've had for the last 3 weeks or so, we've been allocated vaccines to provide to our faculty, staff, and students who meet the state of Florida's, requirements. And I say that, and that's all fine and good, but folks, everybody out there listening, I'm extremely concerned about the hesitancy that people have, in particular African Americans, with regards to getting vaccinated. It doesn't matter if they're on our campuses or not. If people don't come get vaccinated, then we're going to suffer unduly. And we've seen the suffering already, disparities in death and other conditions associated with this virus. And so we need to really get the word out. And we're working on that too with the Florida Department of Health to communicate to our constituents that this is extremely important if we are going to ever be in a mode where we can operate anything close to what we had prior to the onslaught of this pandemic, about a year or so ago. The numbers that I'm hearing now are getting a bit more encouraging in terms of, the African Americans and persons of color tendencies now. But I think if you have institutions like those on this call tonight involved in the the distribution of the vaccine, you have a much better chance of convincing folks in our communities to get vaccinated. And that's the message that we have pushed so hard. And I think that's one of the reasons that the testing site has been so successful as well.
Thank you, Mr. President. And President Frederick, as an MD as well, I know that this mission is near and dear to your heart as well. Tell us about your work there on the campus of Howard, because you indicated just earlier in our programming your concerns about vaccination and efforts to control this pandemic and the coronavirus. What's your work looking like beyond the borders of Howard University into the community?
Yeah, you know, we have stood up a vaccination center at the university. We've now vaccinated thousands of DC residents, and we obviously are coordinating with the DC Department of Health to vaccinate those who qualify to receive the vaccination. You know, one of the things that we have really focused on as a university throughout our history is closing the gap in healthcare disparities. And again, as you can tell, I'm a big fan of Dr. LaFall, as I said, a FAMU alum, because his focus and some of the things that he directed us to do in terms of a thought process, I think really provides us a way forward. He often said that the patient should be the object of our affection, if not the obsession of it. And by putting the patient back in the center of our healthcare system, we can help close the healthcare disparities. We have pharmacists in our ecosystem. We have nursing students in our ecosystem, dentists and dental students, and physicians. And so every point of contact for a patient with any healthcare provider, if we really started to look at our healthcare system from a focus of servicing the patient, we can get there. So what we have done is we've had our students in all of those 4 schools helping with vaccinations, because as we do interprofessional education, our ultimate goal is that when you do go out to the pharmacy or you do go out to the dentist, they can check your blood pressure, they can screen you for diabetes, etc. We actually teach them and train them that way, but unfortunately, when we get out in the healthcare system, we don't use them that way. And that's the primary thing that I think that we are going to do differently. And we are seeing it work right now as we're trying to push the vaccination. And then the second thing that we must focus on is looking at the social determinants of health and how we can impact it. So our nutritional science students have been out shopping with people in the neighborhoods that are most affected, and not just going to grocery stores with them, but going to the corner store to help them make better decisions. And that type of service we think ultimately is important if we really are going to change not just the access issue, but the issue around things like good nutrition, et cetera.
Thank you, President Frederick. President Clark, on the campus of South Carolina State University, tell us more about your role in communicating the right messaging to minority communities during this pandemic, and especially if you have concerns relative to the vaccine. Dr. Larry Robinson indicated his earlier. What about yours?
NC State, unlike my 3 comrades here, does not have a medical school or school of pharmacy, or is not part of a medical school complex. And we're smaller in a very rural area. But at the same time, we have to take the initiative to do the very same types of things. So in working with the South Carolina Department of Health, we've been able to establish this campus, you know, as a testing site every day, you know, where anyone in the community can come and be tested. And we've initiated the dialogue to do, as Dr. Robinson was mentioning at Florida A&M, to have our site become a vaccination site, and that's held up a little bit right now due to supplies, but we hope to get that established for the community, because if you fall back a few steps with us, one of the things that drives what we're doing is a tagline of transformation through collaboration. We know that we can't do it all by ourselves. We have to collaborate. We have to have partnerships and collaboration with all kinds of people to leverage up. And so as we reach out to people to bring resources in. Part of the message of our collaborations with them is that we can reach communities in a way that you cannot. We can have a conversation with communities in a way that you cannot. We can take a leadership position. We can be an existence proof. We can show by example of the regarding taking the vaccine, having the vaccines done by leaders from my campus, and making that visible to everyone, because we know that is part of our responsibility. The other part that we've said is being a land grant institution and having touch points out in these smaller rural counties and communities. We have people out there that know the people, that know we know them, they know us. So as we start communicating and reaching out to them, if we establish facilities and places where people of the community can come to receive the vaccines, they're more likely to take the vaccines if it's members from a trusted entity, like as he stated in this case, that's been out there amongst the community, helping them for over many years. That is part of who we are, what we are about, and what we are all about here. And it's part of, so it is not just students coming into the classroom and hearing a lecture and go taking an exam and getting a degree. It is about elevating everything we can for the communities that we're serving. And that's something that we're doing, that we plan to do a lot more on. And we feel like we're making some progress. One of the things that a little more difficult for us is, making sure that everyone understands it, because the population density is not as great. And so it's a little harder to get the messages out, but we're working toward that.
Thank you very much, President Clark. And now we're going to move into the arena of some of the questions that have been directed our way. One in particular is, how can collabs of this nature that we're talking about this evening develop brain trusts toward sharing of resources in tackling systemic problems in African-American communities? And I'll pitch this first to you, President Frederick.
One of the major things that I think we have to do as HBCUs is really to commercialize our research, to look at our intellectual property as an opportunity. And so one of the things that we're launching on our campus, as I mentioned earlier, is a social innovation hub, where we're going to put social sciences and humanities at the core of that. We're going to wrap it with data science and technology, but also bring in a financial institution and foundation, so that students that are looking at the big problems of the day, income inequality, criminal justice reform, not only come up with policies and potential solutions, but they also have the opportunity to look at forming a business. So often, I think that we have set up our universities for criticism around what we do and don't do around social sciences and humanities. And I think that that's a missed opportunity. I think that students can do good and they can make a good living while doing it. And especially in today's world, when you look at where entrepreneurship is, I think we do have to push that. So I think, for the questionnaire, I definitely, the questioner, I think what we as HBCUs do for all the problems that we tackle and try to solve for, we definitely need to be on a path as well to help commercialize it, as well as collaborate with others to make it even more effective.
So Ms. Cummings, if I could expand this a little bit, I think first of all, people would probably be amazed at the number of collaborations that already exist within our community among HBCUs in particular. And I just, one that stands out to me, actually started back in 1997, my first year. We went to National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, about 8 HBCU leaders, including Howard, right, and South Carolina State at the time. And I was fortunate enough to represent FAMU because Dr. Humphreys was too busy to go. And that resulted in what has been the most significant program in the history of that agency with regards to diversifying its workforce and try to produce more people in the so-called NOR, atmospheric, environmental, and ocean sciences in its history, and perhaps any program in the federal government's history. And I think what we have to be mindful of is that collaborations can come anywhere, and we have them with all kinds of institutions. But I do think we need to be more focused on those collaborations that get to the critical problems that our communities face, and don't be bashful about forming those coalitions that go after federal dollars together, private dollars together, et cetera. You probably all read and heard about the conversation that President Frederick and along with a few other presidents and myself had with, the CEO, of Google just a couple of weeks ago, because we just want the world to know, everybody to know more about what we're doing, and working together. I think we do extremely well. People probably don't know about the program and how it started, Howard West, with Google itself a few years ago, and expanding that program to allow a few of us to come in. And it's been a very effective, collaboration. And so I think that needs to be more deliberate, right? We need to look across our campuses and put the best people together, to compete. Because when I look at, research proposals that are having, that are meaningful and having an impact that we'd like to have, and most of them are, they're interdisciplinary, and many of them are multi-institutional in scope, right? And I think sometimes we look outside of the sector for talent, and that's okay. But you would be amazed at how many good folks are within the ranks of HBCUs who contribute to, some very successful outcomes as well. It needs to be a prime focus on that in order for us to continue the momentum that I think we've established over the years.
And in speaking on the success of, or more successful outcomes, there is another question on another subject about the role of HBCUs and a deliberate effort to address concerns regarding gender equity. President Campbell, I will address that one to you to begin.
Well, it's obviously an extremely high priority for us at Spelman College. And our perspective is that when our students come to us, we tell them immediately, you are here to become global leaders. And don't think that you have to take a second place or a back seat to anybody at any time. Earlier today, I had a conversation. They're called a series called Courageous Conversations, because we want our students to be able to hear what these leadership roles require. And it was one of our Spelman alums, Roz Brewer, who's also the chairman of the Spelman board, who has just become the only Black woman CEO of a Fortune 500 company. So we are always looking for those opportunities to put that outstanding leader, whether it's in the corporate sector or in the arts or in STEM or in public service, in front of our students as a role model. And then there's the reality of our workforce. And a few years ago, we began to develop a leadership development program for the people who work at Spelman, with the idea that if you come here, even to work, we want this to be a place where you can begin to develop your leadership skills and begin to understand how you rise through the ranks, either here at Spelman or someplace else. The same is true for our faculty. We have set up now a faculty development program that enables us to support our faculty so they continue to rise through the ranks, they continue to have time off to do some of their research and reduce their teaching load. So the notion of gender equity permeates the Spelman College campus.
Yes, Ms.
Thank you, Mr.
If I might add,
yes, sir.
I tell people we have to hold ourselves to the same values we expect others to live up to when it comes to diversity and equity. And I appointed a university-wide diversity and equity Inclusion Council, you know, just about 3 years or so ago, early in my tenure, to make sure that those tenets of our mission in terms of our core values, where diversity is explicitly stated, is upheld here just as we would expect it to be any place we sent our students out into the world. And so that group is working all of the time to provide, you know, recommendations and advice, you know, to me and others in the university environment around that issue. It just so happens that we also have an award from the National Science Foundation called Advance. We're looking at these so-called subtle forms of racism when it comes to women faculty, in particular in STEM at the university. And I actually chair the advisory council because, you know, I am very serious about, you know, seeing that we're doing everything that we can do to eliminate the problems of the world. And I say to people all of the time, you know, actually 60% of our students are female, right? So, you know, we don't have the luxury of not taking these things seriously at the university. So I'm really pleased with the work that we're doing there. And as I said, I feel comfortable sitting with any CEO talking about diversity and equity and inclusion because we're doing it here on this campus.
President Frederick, President Clark, would you care to weigh in as well?
Yeah, you know, certainly. I think this is a very important issue. 75% of my undergraduates here at Howard University are women. When I took over the presidency, there was one permanent dean who was a woman out of 13 deans. And I brought that issue to the campus. We did a study, and that also showed that you were less likely to be promoted when you applied if you were a woman. The last 2 years, we've reversed that latter issue. And I'm happy to say that 9 of my 13 deans are women. So I don't interview finalists unless one of them is a woman. And I've stayed committed to that. So it starts with the leadership. You have to be committed to it. And we also, as President Robinson pointed out, we have to own these issues, not just as from the leadership, but we have to be willing to look within our own institution. So Howard University has sent a woman to the White House before a woman occupied this office. So every time I talk about my successor, I use the pronoun she, because we have to ensure that the 18th president of this great university is a woman and reflects exactly the contributions that women have made to make this university great.
And I would say basically ditto to what was said earlier. And you have to practice what you preach, as was mentioned. And if you look at our campus, if you look at our leadership, you'll find that it is, for the most part, in many places, actually dominated by women. Whether it's student leadership, faculty leadership, cabinet leadership, and so forth, in an environment that not too long ago was dominated by men. And that, as it starts from the top, you got to be willing to make sure that as you're looking at individuals, that you're evaluating the skill set and capability, but that you're also intentional and seeking out a diversity of thinking, a background of thought, once you have that capability measure satisfied. So what my comrade said is absolutely on point. If I may, though, I wanted to make a point regarding something that Dr. Robinson said earlier about collaborations and how we collaborate a lot more than people may think, and we are a lot more willing to collaborate than people may think. And probably later this week, there will be a conversation made about something that SC State is involved in. It would be the first time that I think that an HBCU will be involved in the management of a national laboratory. And it will be regarding the Savannah River nuclear lab here in the state of South Carolina. And as part of that, I will, with intentionality, will be reaching out to some of my HBCU counterparts to get plugged into that. That is part and parcel of the dialogue that we had. Up until now, I couldn't say much about it, but since Dr. Robinson pointed it out, we reach out to each other. We will reach out to each other. We know each other, and that's how we operate, and we know that that's how we must continue operating into the future.
Thank you so much, President Clark. You know, we could be here for another hour. I wish we could, but we know that it's Friday Eve, and we know all of you, including ourselves on this team, have to go to work tomorrow. But we are so fortunate to have had an esteemed panel of presidents who generated great conversation tonight. And at this time, we are going to have final remarks, beginning with President Campbell.
Well, thank you. It's always wonderful to be with my fellow presidents because I always learn so much. But I do want to stress this point that was made by one of the questioners. It's been clear that for all of us for a very long time now, that collaborating, consolidating our resources ends up yielding us exponentially more. And we do that knowing that we all have strengths. And by bringing those strengths together, we amplify them not only for our students on our campus, but for students on many campuses. So I look at what's going to happen post-COVID, and I feel very certain that our colleges will actually emerge from this even stronger than they have been. I think we are survivalists. I think we understand change sometimes much earlier than others understand it. And so I have great hope for the future of HBCUs.
Thank you, President Campbell. President Frederick.
Yeah, you know, I want to thank you for moderating, President Robinson for inviting me to participate with my colleagues. You know, when I took this job, one of the things that I always had in mind was the fact that we are actually only as strong as our sector. And I have always seen Howard University as part of a bigger ecosystem. So everything that we try to build here, that I've tried to do during my presidency, is to make sure that our entire sector rises. And that's why I'm always quick to look for the opportunity. I always pivot the conversation to the full breadth of the HBCUs that exist. We have professional schools on our campus that I hope continue to be destinations for HBCUs and HBCU grads all over this country. I am deeply committed to the fact that we are a major part of the solution for what ails us, and also a major part of what we should celebrate in America in terms of what works. And so I think events like this tonight certainly underscore that. And I certainly want to thank you. And again, thank President Robinson for the insight to put us on display in this way. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. We appreciate you, Mr. President. President Clark.
I too would like to say thank you to all involved in this particular undertaking as we communicate and have the opportunity to share with others the camaraderie that we have and our understanding of the task before us. I also am very upbeat about the future of HBCUs, even with COVID, even with all the change. We've always known and had to learn to do a lot more with a lot less. And we've always had to be very flexible. We've always had to learn to pivot and change and adjust to our environments. And so in many ways, this pandemic in some ways has been an accelerant for some of the things that we've always known that we would do or have to do. And we adapt and change and adjust. As many have seen and many have stated that in the midst of COVID, the HBCUs of our nation tend to, word has it, that tend to do a better job of taking care of the students, the faculty, the staff, as well as the communities that they serve. And that's because it's part and parcel of who we are and who we will always be in the future. So thank you for providing us with the opportunity to be able to share a little bit of what we're doing and will continue to do.
And finally, our host, President Robinson.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Ms. Cummings, for being our host this evening and doing such a fine job at that as usual. But I do want to especially thank you, a special thank you to these three great leaders who agreed to be with us this evening to share their thoughts and ideas, as well as some of the wonderful stories about the institutions and the community that we all serve. I'm really proud to be the president of Florida A&M University, but I'm just as proud to be a member of this outstanding community of historically Black colleges and universities. Every single one of them is serving a very meaningful purpose. What would the world be without these fine institutions? And so, as I look to the future too, I am optimistic. This has been a tough, year or so, but we have seen tougher times in our history, and we'll get through this. And as we did in those previous instances, as you've heard this evening, we'll be better for it when it's all said and done. President Clark, I've commented several times that although in our current strategic plan, we had a plan for increasing the number of courses and credit hours generated, virtually with online learning, we had no idea that we would transition from 10% to 100% in just a couple of weeks last year. And now with much greater proficiency in that arena and growing expectations, we have exceeded any, benchmark we had set for ourselves, because of this pandemic. So we're better there than we thought we would be. I am worried, however, about, the mental status of our students. So much they are missing right now that can't be done in a virtual format like this. And every night I leave the campus, I am concerned about what I don't see, as much as I used to, and that is students milling around and chasing somebody out of my parking space and so forth. But, that's part of the wonderful nature of this institution, seeing these young people, seeing in them, the future leaders of our institutions and future leaders of the world. So I just want to thank each and every one of you for taking on these awesome responsibilities, because I know all of you could have been doing just about anything else you wanted to do, but you chose to be the leaders of this institution. I think sometimes people, don't realize that you made a commitment to serving in these capacities because you want to change the lives of the students at your institutions and the communities in which they live. And I think that's something we will always have in common. So thank you again for joining us this evening. And may God bless you and that you stay safe, as this pandemic still stays with us, even here in 2021. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so very much. My late dear grandmother, who would often reflect on her struggle and sacrifice, and she would always say, Carmen, I wouldn't trade nothing for my journey right now. And as we ponder the smorgasbord of our conversation tonight and the points made among the esteemed presidents this evening, I'm sure many of us feel blessed to be either alums or students in our HBCU network, and can say with power and authority that HBCUs and the experience at our HBCUs is real. HBCUs are resilient, and with great authority that HBCUs are relevant. We certainly like to thank you for being a part of this salute to African American history and the accomplishments on the journey that we wouldn't trade as we celebrate the rise and relevance of historically Black colleges and universities. We would also like to thank our dynamic team who helped drive this endeavor this evening. A familiar face and alum, Alonda Thomas, Director of Communications, and Seth Shapiro of Howard University. Joyce Davis, Associate Vice President of Marketing and Communications, and Jasmine Burton of Spelman College. From South Carolina State University, Chandra Abraham, Executive Assistant to the President there, Sonia Bennett Bellamy, and our very own South Carolina State alumna, the Honorable Representative Gilda Cobb Hunter. And from Florida A&M University, our extra special team, Provost Dr. Maurice Eddington, Tawanda Finley, Brittany Smith, Andrew Scarrett, Veronique George, Vernon Bryant, Ron Henry, Wayne Dunwoody, Michael Simmons, Jefferson Walker IV, and our dynamic Director of Communications, Mr. Keith Miles. And of course, to our esteemed presidents who joined us tonight, Dr. Mary Schmidt Campbell, Spelman College, Wayne Frederick, MD, Howard University, James Clark, South Carolina State University president. And where great things are happening every day, I know he wishes that you could join him in the caf with students on fabulous Fish Friday, Dr. Larry Robinson, the 12th president of Florida A&M University. I am Carmen Cummings, a proud journalism school graduate, former television news anchor, and senior investigative reporter. Thankfully, nothing to investigate tonight, only to say how grateful and humble I am to serve and help navigate this moment in our history, African-American history, and the rise and relevance of our prestigious HBCUs. Peace and blessings to you all. Remember to mask up and stay safe. Have a good evening.
Good evening, everyone.